Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. We're just gonna, I can see people are kind of popping in and joining us, which is brilliant. So we're just gonna give a couple of minutes for that, or at least a minute, as everyone's kind of joining. Right. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for already popping things in the chat. That's brilliant. Oh, I can see a hand up, Lynn. Is that a specific question, or is it an accident? Oh, they've gone. Um, all right. Can I just check that everyone can see the slide with the title of the webinar? Yes, I'm getting some thumbs up. Perfect. That's super helpful. Thanks so much, everyone. Cool. We'll crack on. We've got about 70 people in the room, which is brilliant. So just very briefly from myself, I'm Ursula. I work for Cyrenians. We're a homelessness prevention charity based up in Scotland, and I am lucky enough to chair the session today. So I hope you've been enjoying the conference, if you've been doing sessions all day, and if this is the first one that you're joining, then welcome, and hopefully we'll make a good impression. Also hope you have a cool drink or a fan at hand, because it's pretty toasty in the UK this week. So we have a really great program for this session. We're going to hear from Nelly, who works for Mindroom. We're also based in Scotland. And then you'll hear a wee bit from me about some work we've been doing with young people around neurodiversity. And then David Gill from Risk and Resilience is coming in to talk more about how we can provide really neuro-inclusive and trauma-informed services. Program. I'm not going to talk too much at the moment. As well, I can see people already using the chat. Please just use that for reflections throughout. But if you have a specific question for the speakers, if you can use the wee Q&A box, just because that's a bit easier to keep track of. So we'll be keeping an eye on that. We'll have all the speakers, and then we have sort of some time at the end for Q&A. So I'll be keeping an eye on the box and try and guide us through the questions towards the end. I think that is all sort of, just to set the scene and get us all started. So without further ado, I will hand over to Nelly for her presentation first.
Thank you so much, Ursula. So a warm welcome to everybody this afternoon. As Ursula said, it's quite a warm afternoon, but really happy to be here to present this session. So today I'll give you a very brief overview and introduction to neurodiversity. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with its term, but just to give you a bit of an updated knowledge of what and how I will use that term today. And we will reflect on those experiences in terms of neurodivergent individuals and the relationship with homelessness, risk and support. So that will be the topic of today's session. For those who are in the room today who might not be familiar with our organisation, I wanted just to give you a very brief overview of what our charity Mindroom does. So some of you will be based in Scotland, some of you might be based outside Scotland, but for those in Scotland, we are an organisation supporting to raise awareness of all forms of neurodivergence. We were set up many years ago now. So that was back in 2000, so 26 years ago. And we were actually founded by two parents, Sophie and Robin Dow. And that was because their daughter, who is photographed here in the denim, when she was young, she was diagnosed with quite a rare chromosome deletion. So that resulted in an intellectual disability and a form of neurodivergence. So their parents recalled receiving this diagnosis, but not really having anywhere to turn to for information or support. So they founded Mindroom for other families, other individuals maybe going through a similar circumstance to access support. So we've got the link in the chat, which will go in a bit more detail about what services we do offer. But our core work is our direct help and support service. So that provides advice, information, and support on a wide range of issues, including education, rights, responsibility, access to services. That could be anything from education, support services, financial, social work. And that is supporting parent and carers directly of neurodivergent children and young people, and then young people themselves through our advocacy and coaching support. We do have other services as a charity which we get funded for, such as post-diagnostic support for children and adults. We do that in some localities. So my advice to you is to have a look at our website. If you feel you'd like to access some support, or you've got individuals that you support who might benefit from it, please do get in touch. Our service for children, young people, and young adults is free service in Scotland. So do get in touch and we can direct you to the best service within our organisation. And if we can't support, we can definitely signpost you to other services which might be helpful. And then from the perspective from my delivery today, so I will be giving you an introduction to neurodiversity. And my role within Mindroom is the training manager. So I deliver neurodiversity training and consultancy across different sectors. So again, you'll get my details after if there's anything else you'd like to know or you will want to find out a little bit more. So we're going to start off with the term itself very, very quickly, just to go through what the term neurodiversity means and how I'll be using that term today. So neurodiversity as a term is used to describe the natural variations in how humans' brain work. So just as we all have differences in our personality, our culture, our life experiences, we also have differences in how we think, how we learn, how we process information, and how we experience the world. So what you can see on the screen, this is a formal definition of neurodiversity. Being put forward by Dr. Nick Walker, who is a neurodivergent psychologist, who simply says neurodiversity refers to the diversity found in all human brains and minds, the infinite variation in neurocognitive functioning within our species. And then on the right of your screen, you can see an image showing the brain's neural networks. And put simply, this is the wiring system of the brain, and it is thought that it is this wiring system which causes different neurotypes to develop. So the term itself has been around for a few years now. It was put forward by Judy Singer, and that was in 1998, who is an Australian sociologist. But of course, the experiences of neurodivergence has been present way before then. But we just have a term now to include it within the conversation. So when we talk about neurodiversity today, it is that concept highlighting that every single human has a unique cognitive profile. So everybody in this virtual room today, we're all going to have a unique brain, just as our fingerprint is unique, our brain is going to be unique. So collectively, we're all neurodiverse. So all brains are differently wired, and cognitive diversity is a perfectly natural part of human evolution. So we should expect difference. So it challenges this idea that there's one normal or healthy type of brain or mind. Now, when we come to using terminology such as neurodivergent and neurodivergence, that is linking to certain neurotypes, not always diagnosed, but it could include a range of experiences and how people communicate, think, and process information. So that could include autism, ADHD, dyslexia, and other neurotypes as well. In terms of prevalence, it is around 15 to 20% of the population. And I want to highlight here that each individual will have their own preference when it comes to language. So I've also included some more neuro-affirming language, which just invites us to move away from that medical model. And I know many individuals use terms such as neurospicy, neurofabulous, and I tend to use the term neurosparkly. So it definitely gets us to move away from that once medical model to a bit more of a holistic, strength-based model, and allow people to use language which feels right to them. So always invite individuals to share what their preferences are. So I've mentioned the prevalence around 15 to 20% of the population. So that is around 10 million people in the UK. So that equates to around 1 in 7 individuals. So it's really likely that you're going to have neurodivergent individuals within the teams you work in and those you support, and of course in the community. If I was to break these down into a bit more detail in terms of different neurotypes, this just gives you a bit of an overview of some of the common neurominority groups. Now, today I'm not going to go through each neurotype in detail, but I hope by showing you some of the prevalence rates of some recognized neurominority groups, we can see, and it just gives you a bit of an indication. I want to highlight these are those with a formal diagnosis, so it is likely that these statistics may be slightly higher, and we want to really recognize that individuals, many adults, won't have a formal diagnosis, and we shouldn't be supporting based on a diagnosis. We should be basing support around of need and understanding that individual's experiences. But we can see that there's a wide range here. I'm just going to highlight a couple which does have some acronyms. If anybody is in the room and is seeing some of these and you're not too sure what they are, please pop it into the chat. And when I get to the Q&A, or when the other speakers are presenting, I can just add a bit more information there for you as well. So we've got 1 to 2% of the population with autism, 10% with dyslexia, 5 to 6% with dyspraxia. Now, dyspraxia is also known as developmental coordination disorder. So I wanted to highlight that because some individuals may say they have DCD, meaning developmental coordination disorder, and others will use the term dyspraxia, but that is the same neurotype. We've then got 3 to 5% of the population with FASD. Now that stands for fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. We've got 2 to 7% with ADHD, 1% Tourette syndrome, 6% with dyscalculia, 6% with dysgraphia, 7% with mental health, and that mental health statistic includes 3 main mental health conditions: schizophrenia, personality disorder, and bipolar. So I do want to highlight here that there are other co-occurring mental health conditions such as anxiety and depression, which is not in that 7%. We've got 5% with an acquired brain injury and 2% with an intellectual disability. So quite wide ranging, but I do also want to highlight that there is often a lot of co-occurrence. They look quite separate on this screen, but there are recent research which does suggest that it is around 80 to 90% of individuals will have more than one diagnosis. So really important to start awareness and support of an individual. Just get to know them. Their profile is going to be personalized to them, because you might have an individual who is autistic, has dyslexia, and ADHD. And you may have somebody else who has dyscalculia and dyslexia. So their profile is going to be very personal to them. And then some individuals may not have that formal definition of a diagnosis as well. So what I wanted to share with you today is what we are seeing from our service perspective. So as I mentioned with Mindroom, one of our core services is our direct help and support. So we have hundreds, if not thousands, of parent and carers and families coming to us for help and support. And on the screen here are a list of the most common reasons why people are coming to us. So at the moment, we've got families coming to us because there's a breakdown in education. We've got some unmet needs which are escalating kind of to mental health services. I'm also noticing that some of the font sizes have slightly gone different for some reason. So I apologize that you can't quite see the whole phrase in the boxes there, but I'll make sure when you get reshared these slides, they'll be up to normal. Don't know why the formatting has changed, but there we are. We also see a loss of support at key transition stages, and we know that individuals who may be risk of homelessness, it can be those key transition supports. And if somebody is falling through the gaps, that's when these circumstances can happen. We also hear that there's a lot of fragmented systems and gaps, which means that those most vulnerable are not getting the support when they need it. We know that also this can put some family strain and a bit of a relationship breakdown. And then ultimately, it can also lead to individuals being and living in quite unsafe or unsuitable living situations as well. And as I go on today, I'm going to show you a case example to highlight what these experiences look like. So with this case example, I want to share with you that this is a lived experience of one individual. All of the identifications have been removed, but I hope it kind of gives you a bit of an understanding of one individual's experience. And I'm sure many of you in the room might be able to relate to this, or at least maybe supported somebody. The slide you're going to see, there's quite a bit of information. I'm going to read it out to you, but you will get these slides again to kind of look back onto it. So I'm going to read the case study out to you, and then I'm going to kind of break it down in a bit more detail as well. So we've got this individual. They had experienced early advocacy within their childhood, linked to parental substance use, and were later placed in care and residential accommodation. They were excluded from school. Their needs weren't fully met or fully understood, and there was no neurodevelopmental diagnosis until early adulthood. There was early mental health support opportunities, but they were missed, and that included disengagement from CAMHS. As a young adult, they were placed in accommodation where they were vulnerable to financial exploitation. Over time, they became involved in substance use. The mental health deteriorated. That included experiences of disordered eating, addiction, and suicidal thoughts. Following involvement with the justice system, they experienced homelessness and continue to require ongoing support. So what I want to do is break down what this pathway looked like for this individual, and I'll invite you to reflect on it as well and think about what kind of opportunities were missed and what maybe could have been done to support this individual. So firstly, to break it down, what we can see right at the kind of the beginning, that there were circumstances within their family household which led to early adversary experiences, and that young person was taken into care. That young person then had struggles within their school environment. Their neurodivergence wasn't identified, their needs wasn't met, and that led to that young person being excluded. We know that when there isn't that early identification of neurodivergence, there can be often a lot of misunderstanding. So that young person at the time not feeling heard, potentially feeling isolated, they've been excluded, they may be not having that sense of belonging. And actually, there is a real, high percentage of those with a neurodevelopmental condition or an additional support need. They're 4 times more likely to be excluded from school than their kind of neurotypical mainstream peers. So there is research there to suggest that is happening. Then we've got for that young person not getting that mental health support at an earlier stage. We know that sometimes the routes into mental health support, what can look like disengagement, is actually that young person maybe not being at that right place to access that information in that particular way. So instead of maybe that service attempting to support that individual again, that individual is completely removed. They don't have education, they don't have mental health services. So these multiple services, which were kind of involved for this person, were not joined up, which meant that that young person slipped away from these core services, which then ultimately meant that they were placed in unsuitable accommodation. Um, they were very vulnerable in that accommodation. It led to them being exploited. They had increased vulnerability to financial abuse, and also led for them to be getting involved in substance use, and then involvement in the justice system as well. And then ultimately, that led for that young adult to experience homelessness from an early age. So we can see that there is a real kind of lots of different points where um, opportunities were maybe missed. Um, it might, we've seen that they're kind of worsening of mental health. We can also see that there was a difficulty maintaining in suitable accommodation, maintaining education, maintaining employment, and there was a real barrier to access and support. And as these pressures build, the risk of housing instability or homelessness can increase. So once somebody enters that crisis system, the barriers often remain in the same place or even gets higher. And especially if somebody has forms of neurodivergence where their experiences of executive functioning might be different. So that could be keeping organized, their time management, literacy difficulties, different ways of communicating. They have to keep up with appointments, paperwork. They then have to have that self-advocacy. So we do need to see neurodivergence as part of adversity as whole, not just in this one box, but these experiences are often deeply connected as well. So rather than, I suppose, asking what is wrong with the person, what difficulties they are having, it's actually asking where were the missed opportunities to understand the needs earlier so we can reduce these barriers, intervene earlier, and hopefully reduce that risk and that risk to homelessness as well. So as I've said, I mentioned before, so what we're constantly seeing that it's not just one point, there's multiple missed opportunities. So it can also, it's leading to this cumulative risk. So it starts from exclusion, but it really kind of leads to crisis quite quickly. And this can be a repeated cycle for some individuals as well. So if we can acknowledge this kind of cumulative adversary and linking neurodivergence experiences amongst it together, we can really hopefully support individuals a lot earlier on. So before I'm going to go into some examples of maybe what we could have done or what could have been done for that individual, I would always want to invite people in the room, just add it in the chat. If you can think looking at this kind of pathway, what were the opportunities for earlier support? How might have the earlier understanding of that individual's experiences of neurodivergence reduce that homelessness or that repeated crisis? So if anybody's got any thoughts, please add it into the chat. I'm gonna just give you some ideas, and then when we come back together in the Q&A, we can kind of talk about it in a bit more detail. So just a few things which I'm hoping will come through the chat as well. We can see that actually if that individual from a self perspective had that understanding of how their brain works, what those experiences meant for them, and actually people around them had that understanding of neurodivergence, that would have really helped right at the very beginning, because actually that young person may have not got excluded from school. If we had a bit more consistent joined up support across services, that could have really supported that individual to have support a lot earlier. So it's that earlier understanding. And if we can have that consistency across services, it means that that coordination there, because sometimes it's not the lack of services involved, sometimes it's the lack of coordination. So when we see it joined up and it being consistent, we can really see how that reduces the need for people to reach that crisis point. Relationships are super important. I know a lot of people in the room, you will be having those roles where those relationships really do matter. Um, Having a trauma-informed approach and a relationship-based approach as much as possible. If you can take that time just to listen, build trust, understand that person's lived experience, these are often the things that make the biggest difference, particularly for young people who may already feel misunderstood or maybe let down by systems already. With housing, if we can think about more safer, more appropriate housing options much earlier on, that's really going to be critical. We can see that if somebody is placed in unsuitable accommodation, that can increase the vulnerability rather than reducing it. So getting it right is really key to preventing harm. And then we do need to understand kind of transition periods. So whether that is going from finishing secondary school and that key transition period, or moving from a care experience, a care placement or accommodation, we need to make sure that people aren't dropping away. They have that opportunity to be supported. So I'm going to look through the chat and reflect on it as we go. Um, but I also wanted just to bring a slide together so you can just take away some top tips about what we can do in terms of making a difference for that young person's pathway and hopefully for many others as well. So we know that if we can recognize neurodivergence, at the moment we've got thousands and thousands of young people on waiting lists. We've got adults who are waiting 8 years for a diagnosis, and we've got other adults, especially within this sector, who won't be on a waiting list at all. So just really get to know that individual where they are at, listen to their experiences, respect them, give them choice, support them for self-advocacy as well. Try your best to have that approach which is inclusive. You're thinking about accessibility, really reframe language and have a strength-based perspective as much as possible. We know that collaboration, that joined up approach is going to be really helpful. Respect different forms of communication as well. Some people have never had control. If you can be that person to offer that control, flexibility, that's going to be really helpful. And ultimately, just validate and accept lived experience, regardless of a diagnosis. Really do value that individual's experience. That's going to be super helpful. So that has kind of wrapped up my session. We're going to do questions and reflections when we come back. But I will invite you, please get in touch with myself. So that's my details just here. And then if you are working with anybody who you feel our services might benefit them, we've got our direct help and support, and you'll get all these slides after as well. And you'll hear from me again with the Q&A. I'm going to look through the chat, so I really appreciate for people participating and engaging throughout the session. But I'll pass over to Ursula, who will then go on to the next session. But yeah, thank you for your time, and I'll speak to you soon.
Thank you so much, Nelly. Yeah, I do appreciate it's a pretty swift presentation today, but I think some of the messages that Nelly mentioned, I'm kind of going to reiterate in this presentation as well. So hopefully there's a nice sort of clear connection between all the presentations. So brilliant. Just, yeah, very briefly, as I mentioned, I work for Cyrenians, and we're based up in Edinburgh, or sort of southeast of Scotland. We're a homelessness prevention charity, so we work with quite a wide range of people, including young people. And in my team, we lead on our youth participation work. So that includes facilitating a group for neurodivergent young people, which is what I'm kind of going to talk a wee bit about today. And then just in case we have any Scotland-based people in the audience, I also facilitate our local Scottish Frontline network up in Scotland. So that includes organising free learning events, kind of similar to this, webinars, networking opportunities, training. So if you want to get in touch, give me a shout. My contact details will be on the slides, but also I think someone might pop a link in the chat where you can sign up to our mailing list. But enough about me. I'll see if I can figure out how to actually change the slides here. That doesn't do anything. Oh, there we go. Perfect. So just very briefly, I just wanted to introduce our youth participation work, just to set the scene a wee bit. So it is just very much about listening and learning from young people with experience of homelessness and housing instability in various different forms. So we do that in different ways. We run specific kind of thematic groups and do social activities that are all kind of aimed at sort of one, improving our own practice as an organization, and two, to support and build confidence in our young people to kind of speak up and advocate for themselves and for others, and three, to inform and influence public policy and systems change and practice in Scotland. So we realized pretty early on that the majority of the young people that were involved in our participation work were neurodivergent, and they were really keen to create a space where they could get together, socialize, celebrate neurodiversity, celebrate all the different strengths and the different brains that we have, like Nelly mentioned. And also they were really keen to kind of help, I guess, all of Cyrenian services to become more neuro-inclusive. So we've been running this group for about 2 years, and some of the ways that they've been working with projects in Cyrenians, things like, for example, reviewing paperwork, trying to make that more sort of friendly to people who might be neurodivergent, also doing walkthroughs and services, and leading on recommendations around kind of having fidget toys and colored overlays available. So some of the small accommodations that we can all kind of make to make our services more inclusive. So the group also delivered a talk to frontline workers in Scotland maybe a month ago, where they shared their own personal experience of sort of childhood and school and adulthood as neurodivergent young people, and the many kind of misunderstandings and social pressures that they've been through. And this is kind of this presentation is based on that slide, or their slide, sorry. Unfortunately, you're stuck with me and not our great young people, but I hope you'll bear with me. They did trust me to use their slides and just kind of really convey some of the key messages that they have for adults and support workers in the sector. So the first one is a quote from one of our youth advisors, and it's, if you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. And I think it just really links into what Nelly talked about, that everyone's profile is different, even whether people have a diagnosis or not, and whatever other experiences that they bring. So you can't kind of make those assumptions based on, for example, a diagnosis. It's just really important to see each person for who they are. And also something that David is going to talk more about is that, you know, people who are neurodivergent may also have trauma experiences, and those things are quite like linked closely. And always remember that the person is the expert in their own experience. So it's great that we're doing, you know, things like this, that we're doing training and upskilling. But really, what's really important is that listening and believing and seeing that person. And then just that sort of appearances can be, you know, deceiving sometimes. Sometimes internal struggle might not be obvious. A lot of the young people that we work with have really experienced kind of either being overlooked or being sort of, I guess, forced to fit expectations and things just because their appearance didn't fit with what assumptions adults in their lives were making. So this has especially been true for girls and young women who might present slightly different from what people expect from different neurodivergent types. So just remember that all behavior is communication, and things like maybe shutdowns or someone being nonverbal, not wanting to speak, it's all, you know, communication, or it might be survival responses. But often what we see is that behavior is kind of misinterpreted and can be seen as laziness or defiance. And I would say all the young people we work with have a very strong sense of justice and fairness and honesty. But actually their experience, what they've told us, is that they see that society doesn't really reward that. It rewards compliance over that authenticity. And when they bring that emotional honesty, it's often labeled as difficult behavior. So that's something to kind of think about. And then the last one, which always just really stands out to me, is sometimes support means just being present, not fixing, which I think is a really good one to take away. And then this sometimes, like some of this is similar to what Nelly mentioned, but just some practical advice that they really want adults to know about. And again, this is coming from a young person's perspective, but this will also count for adults who are neurodivergent that you work with. A lot of these accommodations actually work for a lot of people. So I think we need to sort of not see it as just a sort of niche box over here. It's actually something that can be helpful in our practice in general. But yeah, first of all, it's again working to strengths, focus on strengths, abilities, interests. There might be things that are challenging, but there's a lot of things that are not, and there's a lot of things that people are way better at than other people. So I think it's just about finding those abilities and interests, and also flexibility, which I know Nelly mentioned. Honestly, it's just so important because it's sort of, you often feel like people are having to fit into specific expectations, and of being asked to sort of live up to goals that are just not realistic, but also how helpful it is when you are in environments that try and meet you where you are at, and ask, where do you want to have your support meeting, or do you want to, what hours work for you, what kind of communication works for you, do you prefer written, do you prefer verbal instructions, like all of those kind of things. And yeah, that really sort of works with that. Also, some people who are neurodivergent can struggle to kind of maintain like a consistent energy level, which doesn't really fit well with 9 to 5, sort of the traditional kind of working week that we might have now, and same in school, and that's really not recognized. But actually, like, having those bursts of energy can be extremely productive, and I think it's just about recognizing that, again, we all work slightly differently, and that's not a bad thing. Again, just ask, don't assume. I think we already kind of talked about that, and just check in regularly instead of trying to make decisions on behalf of that person. As I've already mentioned, some of these accommodations can be quite simple. Things like having fidget toys or tools available in your services, being able to allow for some quiet spaces where people can withdraw to if they're feeling a bit overwhelmed, and also just give people sort of time to process before they have to maybe respond and make a decision, which again, things that I think will probably benefit most of us. And finally, just kind of, it's a bit of a given, but support without shame, and just try and think about all of like the experiences that people have had of being misunderstood or misinterpreted, or being labeled as maybe lazy or not motivated, and all of these things. Just try and reframe that and get away from that, and also kind of maybe accept that sometimes the support that you offer might look a little different, and that's not a bad thing. So I will say sometimes the neurodiversity group meetings can look a little chaotic from the outside, but actually I think it's about trusting that you are doing what's right for those young people, and you're actually creating a space where they can be themselves and they don't kind of have to sort of mask their behaviors. I'm not going to go too much into masking because I know David is going to talk about it, but it's basically just trying to find, create spaces where people feel like they can fit in. And then that might look a bit different than what other people expect, but that's, again, not a bad thing. So that was a very short summary from me, just talking about some of the advice from our young people. And I am now going to stop sharing my screen and hand you all over to the brilliant David, who's going to talk to us more about trauma-informed practice and neuro-inclusive services.
Thank you, Ursula. Hopefully that's come up for everyone on the screen. Yes, we got a thumbs up. Brilliant stuff. So thank you all for coming along today. And a lot of what I will be talking about now will be building on all the wonderful stuff that Ursula and before that Nelly was discussing as well. And the aim of this session, this part right now, is thinking about the overlap of trauma with neuroinclusivity and sort of a bit trauma informed, sorry, new inclusivity, and doing what we can to create the best spaces possible. Again, a lot of this will be building on what has already been said. But I think it's so important to dig a little bit deeper and to understand why we are saying what we are saying. Um, so, firstly, who am I? So, I started Risk and Resilience back in 2018 with a focus on the taking a trauma-informed approach. My background is working in third sector organizations, working with people with multiple overlapping challenges. And trauma was something that seemed to link so many things together. And I've been on a bit of a mission for the last yeah, God, goodness, 8 years of trying to work with organizations, help and support, and everything that goes within it. So that when I first started was a lot to do around substance use, looking at people's mental well-being, looking at the impact on staff through vicarious trauma. And what I found a few years into the journey was actually a lot more people were talking about neurodivergence. And people were talking about how that fit into the world of trauma and being trauma informed. And you started to delve into it and you realize that there was often a strong overlap. Um, oh yeah, yeah. Sorry. I was that. I will try and keep to time. Yes, and there was a strong overlap between people's background, people experiences, and perhaps how they were then accessing services in later life. I'm not going to go into too much of the statistics because it's something we do on our training. We don't really have time, and it's not that what we need to focus on this moment in time. But ultimately, a lot more studies have shown that the vulnerability that you may have, not everyone does have, from being neurodivergent means that you become more at risk of trauma in early years, not just from perhaps adverse childhood experiences in the home environment, within communities, how you present, how you engage with education, how you engage with peer groups, how you are able to express yourself if you are experiencing pain or having physical health problems or other mental health challenges. There's all of these overlapping things that come together that made me realize that this has to be as much of a focus and very much this terminology of creating neuroinclusivity as much as trauma informed had to be brought into the equation. So we work with organizations around training. I've been very privileged to deliver training for the Frontline network on several occasions. Wonderful experience, and worked with services in England, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and the joy/challenge of each of individual countries is there was often a slight legislation shift in each one. Nothing big, but it's often worth considering. Work with services around reflective practice as well. So again, creating safe spaces, new inclusive spaces for staff to talk about how they can become the best they can be for the people they support, including that new inclusive process. And we have a range of other resources on our website that I'll share, as well as a podcast. And we're currently in the process of doing a deep dive neurodivergence podcast as well, which if you are interested, this is a call to arms. This is your opportunity to get in touch. And I'd love to hear from people as well. Because one of the reasons why we're doing this is that a lot of people are overwhelmed by this as a concept. They don't know where to start. They can be a bit scared about getting it wrong, the classic, that fear that we all have. And I think sometimes engaging with people in a safe space about a podcast where there's no pressure to listen at a particular time, share with your colleagues, can be a wonderful way to learn more about it, both in terms of what people have gone through with their own neurodivergence and how we are being neuroinclusive in our services. Okay, enough about that. So neurodiversity and trauma. What we know is that trauma can affect so much. And as much as we know about trauma, we are still learning every single year. There is still something else that we learn all of the time. It's all locked up here in our primitive brain when we experience trauma because it's to do with our most primitive response, our survival response. It gets locked away in our primitive brain. And it can therefore affect how we see the world, how we respond to the world. Attention, memory, emotional regulation, sensory processing, all things that could also affect someone if they're neurodivergent. If you are neurodivergent and have experienced trauma, trying to pull those things apart can be very difficult. which is another thing that we've recognized, and this is a challenge that we've seen in all services when working with people, is that we work in a system that usually likes to look at things in isolation. Let's look at your mental health, then we'll look at your homelessness, then we'll look at your substance use, then we'll look at neurodivergence. And we know it doesn't work like that. These things are often all mushed together, and so pulling them apart can be a massive challenge. As we said, neurodivergent people are at heightened risk. And if we have this one size fits all approach, which again, Ursula and Nelly were talking all about not having, if we do have that, we are creating experiences and services that aren't necessarily just going to be not effective for people, but potentially re-traumatizing and incredibly harmful for individuals if they have a service that just doesn't fit their needs. So this one size fits all just isn't the way forward. So when you start to look at these things together, to create a trauma-informed and neuro-inclusive service, you are talking about environments, relationships. It's also about the core components of trauma-informed practice, safety choice. It's about understanding how people process and always challenging terminology like the norm. And another red flag that I hate is when people say it's just common sense. It's a terrible phrase that should be outlawed. Um, and we need to understand that what might be happening for someone might be down to something that has been there a long time. It's who they are, it's what they've experienced, and then therefore how they're going to experience things with you. And we have, and I often describe it to people, we have an opportunity to give someone a gift of true support, true care that they may never have experienced before because people haven't understood who they are. So it's an opportunity, and I think this is another way of looking at it, seeing it as an opportunity, not something to be fearful of. Because again, you hear things like, oh God, I'm going to get it wrong. I'm going to say the wrong thing. How do I deal with these things? Again, it can be massively overwhelmed. But if we take a step back and see it as an opportunity, that strength-based approach, we can make a real difference. Again, I'm not going to go into this in too much detail, but as Nelly was saying, the different neurodivergent profiles, if we started to look at these in isolation, we could spend a whole day on each one of these profiles. And there is some joy to do that if your service specifically works with people with autism, for example, understandable. But if you are working in a service that works with different people, again, looking at this could be overwhelming. So what can we do? Well, we need to think about themes that can work for everyone. Look at common themes that will create neuro-inclusive services. And the irony is, before we even look at this, and I know I've talked about strength-based, we also need to look at what's maybe holding people back. And it's not always as obvious as people think. And for me, a good starting point is this concept of masking. You may have heard of this before, you may be fully understood this world before. But I think it's important for us to just recognize it and spend a little bit of time delving into this a little bit. What do we actually mean? Well, ultimately, when someone is masking, someone is suppressing, hiding, camouflaging who they naturally are to try and feel more normal. I've used the term neurotypical there, but ultimately it's that pressure every human being has of being normal, not being different. Not again, normal doesn't exist. Often we strive for it. We feel we need to, or we feel the pressure on us by society. And when we think about masking, sometimes one of the misconceptions around it is it is a conscious choice. It's something I do to fit in. I sort of act in a way. I become an actor. But for some people, their masking has been there since they were so young. It's formed their identity, and they can struggle to unpick what their masking actually looks like because they are so used to trying to fit in. They don't probably know exactly what they want or who they are as a person. And you can see the challenge of this in later life when people have a diagnosis, perhaps in later life. They suddenly go, brilliant, I've got this. And then you can see almost they go in a bit of a downward spiral for a bit because they think, well, hang on a minute, who am I as a person? Will my friends still like me? Will my partner still like me? Will I still be able to function at work if they know this about me? So it can be a very difficult thing to understand. Even when we do understand it and pull it apart, it can be a huge challenge for individuals. So it comes in many different shapes and sizes. People do this as a survival strategy. And again, you can see elements of this in trauma survival as well as for people who are neurodivergent. These are not the only examples. These are just some sort of general things that we tend to see that may be examples of behaviors that could be seen as compliant, or on the flip side of that, on the other end of the spectrum, has been difficult, challenging, whatever it may be. But it's these behaviors that we have that come about as a result of our masking. I hide behind things to keep myself on the mistaken belief that I keep myself safe, or in the past, it has kept me safe. So for some people, avoiding asking for help is a big one. They may have learned this from their family units, from their education systems within their wider community, or when they have asked for help in the past and they've had a not so positive response to this. Particularly if, say, because of their ADHD, they've struggled with tasks. They may have been told, you're difficult, you're lazy, don't do this. Or if they're dyslexic, it may be they may have been challenged about their ability to spell and therefore had horrible phrases like, you're just stupid, why don't you do this? All of these horrendous terms that can stick with people for years, which means whether you're a teenager into adulthood, I just don't ask for help. Another camouflaging strategy can be mimicking. You see how other people act and behave and you copy, which means that you can then hidden in crowds. So you become very much in the middle. You're not too needing too much support, not needing too little. You sort of blend into the background. But if you are then mimicking perhaps not so positive behaviors, you can put yourself at added risk as well. Forcing sort of social norms as well. A lot of people can find eye contact, smiling, social norms overwhelming, and yet they pressurize themselves into doing things. And again, one of the things that you will see with this is it takes a lot of energy to do this. So if I'm putting all my energy into trying being normal, forcing that eye contact, smiling, engaging, all my energy is being used up for that. So when it comes to the stuff that I actually need, I don't have any energy left, which can be linked to downplaying your needs or distress. You are really, really struggling, but again, you don't fully get across what you're going through, or you downplay it because, again, you don't want to be seen in a certain way. It can also be seen through giving sort of short, agreeable answers, really short to the point things of just, yep, this is what I need, which could be seen as a person being difficult, not opening up, or even giving short, agreeable answers can actually be just how you function. That is just how you get across what you need. But for some people, it's that worry about vulnerability. Or if I do truly get across where I'm at, how will this be used against me? Fear, uncertainty. Or withdrawing in groups or gone quiet in groups. So again, if you are told you need to engage with a group setting and you spend all of your energy to fit in, to stay quiet, to sit still, you use all of that energy to fit in, to be normal, but when it comes to engaging with the group, getting something from it, it gets lost because your energy has gone into this. You can get a very specific form of burnout from this when you are repeatedly doing this on a daily basis, your whole life. Not just accessing services, but you can see this in staff fitting in with their workplace. You can see it people within their friendship groups feeling forced to engage in things that they don't always want to do because they want to fit in. And it takes so much energy out of people. It can lead to a very specific form of burnout. So for me, one of the best things to do when working in a trauma-informed, neuro-inclusive setting is to think about this concept of masking. You're not going, just like with trauma, you're never going to be able to see what people have gone through, nor should you, but you can often see it through the behaviors. And for me, it's the same with the masking. What might that behavior be hiding? It's not about judging, it's not about trying to find with a tick box exactly what is going on for this person, but is this person maybe acting and behaving in a certain way because it's a survival strategy that they have been using for many years? So if we're thinking about it in this way, responding to someone who is neurodivergent, who may be masking, who may not have a formal diagnosis, just like in the world of being trauma informed, where you create environments to meet everyone's needs, and it just so happens it benefits those who've been experiencing trauma, it's the same with creating neuro-inclusive services. The same concept happens. If you create these environments that meet their needs, hopefully it has that wonderful knock-on effect for others. Both of these examples are examples of that dropped curb theory, isn't it? The idea that you drop the curb for people with prams, but you have that knock-on effect of, for people in wheelchairs, you have the knock-on effect of benefiting people with other mobility issues, people in prams. One solution for one area has a wonderful benefit for others. One of the first things to think about. And again, I'm going back to the image that Nelly was sharing earlier on about the brain and all the different wires within it. And a lot of it, you can think, rather than looking at the individual profile, instead, you can think about something called our executive functioning. And this is often, I've heard people describe it as your air traffic control, which I love that concept. The idea of you've got all of your planes flying around your brain, and you find your own way of understanding where your planes are flying and landing them and letting them take off, always avoiding a crash as much as we can, letting things run smoothly. But how your air traffic control works is different to everyone. Whether you identify as neurotypical or neurodivergent, everyone's air traffic control is different. So instead, what you can do is pull apart the core concepts of the executive functioning and think about putting little wins in along the way that would benefit anyone, whether they are neurodivergent or neurotypical. In terms of impulse control, one of the things that you can do is think about just having regular breaks and pause points, clear language, avoid things being rushed. Again, if someone is dysregulated naturally or because they're just dysregulated because they're having a bad day, giving people as much space as possible is fantastic. And I know we're all in a very, very busy environment. We don't have unlimited time, but just giving even just an extra few seconds for a point can make a difference. Normalize regulating before problem solving. So if someone comes in crisis, you're already a bit on edge as well. If you then jump straight into, right, we need to sort this out, we need to problem solve, you're building on that person in an emotional state. Have things like grounding, self-soothing tools, mindfulness exercise, simple things that you can sort of normalize with an individual to bring them down and both get yourself where you need to be. You are then sort of almost in a position of what we call co-regulation. You're demonstrating it, they're demonstrating it, and guess what? You often get as much out of it as that person as well, particularly if it's a hot, sweaty day like this. And even open-ended questions where you are not going to get, and I fall into this trap all the time with my children. They do something, why did you do that? Knowing full well, they probably don't know why they've done that, but my default response is to that. And then I have to take a step back and maybe unpick that in a slightly different way. Grounding, predictability, all of those work within the world of emotional control. Flexibility. So flexible thinking. Some people really like structures. So if we are going to be shifting things, giving people as much warning as possible is vital. And if you like flexibility, you don't worry. But if you like the structure, you are given as much warning as possible. Offer choice. Again, that is a wonderful concept in both trauma-informed practice and neuro-inclusive services. Choice as much as possible. And why? It sounds an obvious thing, but just saying to someone, well, we're going to have to do this can cause distress. Saying to someone, we're going to have to do this because of, can limit that distress. Again, a few extra seconds makes the difference here. And time to process. It's the same with whether it's forms or it's thinking, giving someone and go, right, read that, sign it, or I'm going to give you the information. What do you think? It puts pressures on people. And again, it kicks it into that masculine ability to go, yeah, I fully agree with that without maybe having time to think about it. Even if that person is giving you short, agreeable responses, again, it may be masking. Give people as much time as you can and keep revisiting it. Working memory, again, working memory is going to be different from individuals. But if you are relying on verbal stuff a lot of the time, consider adding visual stuff and written stuff. If you're relying on written stuff a lot of the time, think about how you can bring in visual stuff as well. Or even like audio reminders. Even we all have these things in our pockets now. We have apps on them. We have voice recording. We have all of this wonderful stuff. And we often say these things can be the bad guys, which of course they can, but they can also be our friends in times like this. And break instructions into step, clear little by little steps. And always, for me, it's always a simple reflection of when you're saying things like, it's just common sense, or we always do that, don't we? That is a good red flag to stop and say, yeah, I don't think that's going to work. We need to break it down even further as well. And find ways to check understanding. Understand what a person's yes doesn't always mean a full yes. And find ways to repeat information without getting frustration. Because if you get frustrated, that might trigger that person to then mask further or reject your support further as well. Feedback. Find ways to provide regular feedback. Clear stuff as well. We need to have a chat. You need to do better. All vague responses like that can cause increased anxiety for individuals. Find structured check-ins, regular check-ins with someone, keep someone up to date as well. One of my biggest bugbears is around support planning. We create these overly aspirational plans that are probably for us to tick a box rather than that individual. Simple stuff. Even when you think you've got a simple goal, break it down and make it even more simple. This isn't to say that, we're making things too easy or we don't trust that people can achieve things. It's not that. It's we want people to achieve. We want to make it as simple as possible and keep going over and over into them. Don't be afraid to revisit them in a few weeks' time. And if they have fallen apart, it's not because you've done something wrong, maybe because that trust is there now and they are ready to open up to you fully. Again, keep going, smallest possible steps, but work together. The danger as well within the world of neurodivergence, and particularly around masking or when people have struggled, they may not have been empowered in the past and they may have had stuff done to them and they may be used to this. There's this concept called learned helplessness. When you are so used to having things done to you, you just keep having them done to you and you expect it. Working with people to empower them is one of the greatest gifts you can give people. I'll sit with you, I'll start together, and then I'll take a step back. You are showing your support without taking over. And consistent systems as much as possible. Offer them, and if people want flexibility, great. But if you start with consistency, it's that person's choice for flexibility. If you have consistency and they want it, you keep to it as well. And again, verbal, visual, mushing those things up is key. So executive function is a good starting point. A couple of other things I'm just going to whistle through pretty quick is around maintaining safety for people as well. So when you are working with people about maintaining safety, clear actions. So as we said, visuals, audio recordings, the same thing is going to keep coming back as well. Making sure people know, because often you'll say, well, it's just the rules of this place. You broke the rules and this is what's happening to you. Here's a warning letter. Are we explaining things as clearly as we possibly can, as we can do, rather than if this happens, we'd have to have a chat, can cause, as we said, further overwhelm and fear for that individual. Making sure we're clear and making sure your colleagues have your back as well. One of the best things you can do is create what we call a safety plan. We have this in a toolkit we've designed, a trauma-informed toolkit, where rather than wait for crisis events to happen, you work out what the trigger points can be, and from the get-go, you have safety plans in place. So someone says, I don't like a waiting room. It overwhelms me. Right. Well, where can we meet you that isn't that? I don't like meeting in the morning. My energy levels haven't peaked. Right. We only offer you afternoon appointments. So you create safety from the get-go rather than waiting for something to go wrong and then managing it through risk management. And motivate them. If you know what works for that person is they hate sitting in a one-to-one room and having a classic key working session, you can't motivate that person by saying, you've got to come to the room. Let's go for a walk together. Let's find ways to do this. If we do have to meet into a room, can we have music playing in the background? Can we sort of move around? Again, as Ursula was saying earlier on about the fidget toys, little tweaks like that can make a big difference. And if something does go wrong, try and make sure that you have a safety plan and that you stick to it. Fairness means people get what they need, not that they get the same as everyone else, which is one of the biggest misunderstandings around this. People might not know if they've done something wrong. They may not have understood it. Never use punishment. Always use it as an opportunity to take a step back and learn as well. One of the best tools we've had for years that works wonderfully well in creating new inclusivity is restorative approaches. So understanding what people have gone through rather than warnings and must do this. Understand how can we make things better? How can we help you to understand what you've gone through and you yourself, how you've perceived this. And shame. Shame is one of the biggest things that will hold people back. And it's one of the things that can perpetuate someone constantly masking their behaviors as well. Don't apply shame to the individual. Make sure you're doing whatever you can to think about how is this person feeling? What can I do to help educate this person and educate myself? If you are, I'll go through this relatively quick. If you are offering group engagements, always think, is this right place for this person? So I do a lot of work with drug services and their default response is is group settings. For some people, it's overwhelming. However, they're often told if you don't engage with that group, you don't get the support. How can you respond to that? Again, group agreements is one of the biggest wins you can have before you even start the group. Be clear. This is what will happen. Are you okay with that? Do you need stimming tools? Do you need regular breaks? And educate other people in the group if that person gives you consent to do so. For example, if someone had Tourette's, how would that person like to be to let their group know about their tics, how to respond, how to not respond, and listen to the feedback. It's not always obvious, but it can make a difference. My top tips from today, the one to take away more than anything else, is around physical environments. Go back to your environments. If you say run a supported accommodation, you have a centre, you have reception areas, walk through your physical environments and think, how does this feel? I also encourage you to stop at your reception area and go beyond that. Not stop, sorry, there, go beyond it. What's it like to walk up to the front door? How do you get from the street to this site? All of those steps, what could that cause overwhelm? What could that cause stress? How can we make a difference to that person when they are engaging? We've got other tools and top tips as well that we go into a lot more detail on our full day's training. I'm not going to go into it now, but we do have, if you want a little bit more information, which includes stuff for staff as much as the people that we are supporting as well. That is on our website under our resources page. We are going to put a lot more on there, but it is just largely me, and so I struggle to find the time to do that. But yeah, those are on there for you to take away. And we have updated our training profile as well as our standard neurodiversity awareness. We've done a full session now around supporting staff, specifically for service users and service substance use and mental health. I know you can mush all these together, which we do in our individual sessions, but sometimes breaking them apart really makes a difference. If you want more information around that, or even if it's not just formal training, you just want to have a chat, do drop me a message and get in touch. We also have the podcast I mentioned. Again, I'm running out of time. So all I would say about that is if you do want to be on it, we're going to do a 3-part documentary style, talk about what it looks like, the challenges, practical approaches. Celebrating the good stuff is the key. Do get in touch and I will happily have that conversation and hopefully we'll get you on it. But that's me. Just a minute over. So thank you very much for listening today. I guess this isn't just questions for me. This is questions for everyone else.
Brilliant. Thank you, David. Yeah, if you stop sharing your screen, then I can see you guys as well, which is lovely. So minutes, guys. I know it's late in the afternoon. People might be a bit tired, a bit warm, but please, if you have any questions, if you pop them in the Q&A. Otherwise, I have a couple of prompts that I think might be interesting to look at just in case, because there's nothing in the chat right now. But I was just thinking, David, because we had someone in the chat kind of sharing that their own personal experience of, going through life, being neurodivergent, and you just mentioned your training around kind of staff as well. And I just thought we haven't really we talked a lot about supporting people who are neurodivergent, but actually and that's to both of you, if you wanted to talk a wee bit about maybe good practice that you've seen from organizations around kind of supporting their own staff teams or something like that, I've thought I would use that as a bit of a prompt while people are getting their questions in.
Yeah, so one of the things that I tend to do at the staff one, particularly, it tends to be more aimed towards managers and that worry about, again, the things you hear is I'm worried about I'm going to get it wrong. It seems to be one of the common things you hear people say. And you may all be familiar here with that term, reasonable adjustments. And I think so many people get bogged down with worried that they're going to get something wrong. They don't make any adjustments. And I keep coming back to that term. So it's not unreasonable adjustments, it's reasonable adjustments. And particularly when you are working in the third sector where money is very tight, you don't have millions of pounds to update things and do everything as wonderful as we possibly can be. For me, it all comes down to intent. Are you creating an environment that is intending to be as open, as welcoming as possible for that person? Yes, brilliant. It's a learning process. Your intent is to make a difference. And it's important that we do that. It's important that we have those questions and get it out there. Again, in that toolkit that I mentioned on the website, I know we've not done a lot about it, but we have things in there about creating safety plans for staff. So the moment someone comes, even part of the induction process, even part of the interview process, can't even think of the word. Every step of the way, what are we going to do to create this environment as safe as possible? You don't even have to say because of neurodivergence or neuroinclusivity, it's how can we make you feel safe as possible in this job? What is going to be stressful times, difficult times, what's going to be good times? Have that from the get-go will really make a difference. Nelly, I don't know if you want to jump on in, so I don't want to take over.
No, not at all. I would adhere everything, David, what you've mentioned there. I just popped in the chat a bit more of from a lived experience perspective, because I know sometimes it's where to start, what can I ask for? It's not always clear in organizations. But there's it's called Manual of Me. It's not neurodivergent specific. I'm not putting it in because I'm linked to it at all. I just find it quite a helpful tool. So that is just online. I've put the link there. You could just do it on your own. It works through kind of how you communicate, what is your best kind of working environment, and you can just do that for you. Or you can, I know that individuals have done it in organizations and then shared it with their line manager, and also teams can do it as well. So it just helps you be aware of different communication styles, and actually it might just help you reflect on how you work best as well. So that's just there. And yeah, I just echo everything which David said. I think sometimes in a kind of a workplace environment, if you are line managers in the room, I think making the processes as clear as possible so people can make an informed choice. I think a lot of people just don't know where to start, and a lot of responsibilities put on the shoulders of that individual. So if we can lift that responsibility off and have it in the conversation a lot earlier on, that can be really helpful as well. But yeah, I'm sure myself and David and Ursula, if you want to have a bit more of a deeper dive in any of this in terms of the workplace, I'm sure we can share a bit more insight, or if you want any specific trainings or sessions, just reach out to myself or David, and we'd be really happy to kind of talk you through those kind of next steps. And I'll share a wee manual as well at Mindroom. We just did a best practice guide. It's called Thriving Workplaces. So please feel free. I'll send a link to it. You can just flick through it, and if that's helpful, that's a helpful start as well.
Brilliant. Thank you both. I knew you were both the right people to ask about this. And yeah, I guess just sort of from my own perspective as well, I do line manage someone with ADHD, and that's been a learning curve. But just as David says, it's a process, and if you have that trust and you've established a relationship, it just means that we maybe do things slightly different, or I just need to figure out, okay, you're absolutely incredible at this, and I don't need to do anything. And then there might be what would for me feel like a small task that is sort of feels like a mountain, and it's just kind of getting to know how that person works. And I think it's just been super helpful for me, and even just having the group with young people as well, of just being aware of these differences, and just bringing that flexibility and that trust that people know what they're really good at, and also just celebrate all of the amazing things that people do, and then just make sure that you're propping up places that might be challenging, and that's your kind of role, I guess, as a team leader or line manager or colleague, just in general. I think that so all the things that we talked about today about supporting people, it's the same whether it's your team, someone on your team or a colleague, or whether it's someone that you're supporting in a key worker relationship. So I'm just going to have a quick look at the chat. Just thanks people just saying it's been really informative and sort of helpful to kind of not feel like you're getting things wrong and then saying the wrong thing. So yeah, sorry, Nelly, did you want to jump in?
No, again, it was just to echo what you said there in terms of keeping it as, that balanced approach as possible. And I'm sure David can relate to this as well. A lot of the times when organizations do get in touch, it's kind of when things have broken down or when things have gone wrong. And ultimately, if you can start having more balanced conversations of what people's strengths are, what their skill set in within the job, and then if there are differences, have conversations around accommodations or what would support, and also don't be afraid to talk about best work from role fit, because sometimes you start in the role and there might be other positions which will link more stronger to your skill sets, and that's not a negative conversation to have as well. So yeah, I think it's really helpful that's come up, because yeah, as lived experience of supporting individuals in your own frontline working roles is it's super important, but also kind of supporting and acknowledging those experiences as a worker, employee, line manager, whatever that might look like is super important as well. So yeah, I appreciate that coming to the forefront. And yeah, just don't be afraid to talk about this in the conversation. I think sometimes it can lead to a bit of a culture of silence. So if we can kind of relieve that and people do feel a bit more confident, we've done a really good job today. So thank you for kind of people sharing in the chat and for everybody's input as well.
One of the things I just want to leave everyone with, someone said this to me years ago and it stuck with me. If we put the pressure on ourselves to get something right and we don't think we have, the only other option in our head is we've got it wrong. So instead, always look at this rather than worrying about getting it right. Keep going back to what is the value of this decision? Who is this helping? How is this going to be helping? And it will naturally become the right decision because you are looking at it and the intent will be there to make a difference. So never put the pressure on to get it right because you are your own worst enemy. The value that will really make a difference. I'll shut up now because
Brilliant
I'm melting.
closing remarks. I'm not going to say anything else. That was great, David. Thank you so much, David and Nelly, to everyone who are here today in the chat. As Elizabeth has been saying, there will be resources shared. So please, share far and wide with colleagues and in your own organizations and beyond. And yeah, please do get in touch with folks here on the call for specific trainings or questions. All of our contact details will be on the slides. And yeah, really appreciated that. It's always tricky with webinars. You can't really see people, you can't speak to them, but you guys have been brilliant in the chat. So yeah, hope everyone's had a good day, enjoyed the conference. Take some time to fill out the feedback form and have a good rest of your afternoon. Hopefully you can enjoy the sunshine a wee bit as well. Brilliant. Well, I'm going to close this off for now. 4 o'clock on the dot. Excellent. Thanks, everyone. Bye now.